Hello, my name is Brunet-Jailly. I'm the Jean Monnet Chair in Innovative Governance, which means that I'm offering a number of courses that compare the Canadian experience with the European Union experience, what is going on in Europe today. One of the courses that I want to talk to you about today is called Intergovernment Relations or Intergovernmental Relations, comparing the European and Canadian experience. This course is a course where we basically look at the relationships between different governments. And we don't look just at the federal level. We look at relationship between different tier levels of government. So we look at the role of the federal government, the provincial governments, and also local governments such as municipalities. But also in the Canadian case and the European case, we look at the role, the many different roles of First Nations in their relationship with other levels of government. One aspect of the course also is that we look at the role of other actors and other forces in the policy process, such as socio and economic actors and organizations in the way they interact with the different levels of government, such as local government, provincial or federal government, First Nations, and how, as a result of these relationships, policies are born, basically, and how policies address issues in the two different settings, the one in Canada and the one in the European Union. So we look at different aspects, and let me talk to you a little bit about the units and the amount of work and the grading and all of this. So the course is organized around 12 units. So every year you start with a unit where you have to introduce yourself, and then we go more in the details. We start from there. We look at federalism, and we look at multi-level governance. These are kind of concept words, but this is in Unit 2, we learn the vocabulary. We learn how these different words and what they mean and how these basically organizers are thinking and how it differentiates also the Canadian experience from the European experience. And then we look at that diversity of actors that I was talking to you about a minute ago, which is trying to really understand what is a policymaker. Is it just a federal member of cabinet, or is it a provincial member of cabinet, or is it an MLA or an MP, or is it even a private sector lobby person, or is it the leader of a non-profit organization? Trying to understand who are the policy actors, how they interact, and what regulates, in a way, what organizes their interaction. So we look, in Unit 3, we look at economy, cultural, and the political basis of the Canadian federal system, but also of the European, in a way, multi-level governance system, and how all of this comes together. In Unit 4, we really look at the relationships, and we look at, in a way, the mandates that they would have, and how these mandates are written inside the institutions, how people and groups interact, and how they basically address issues and make policy together. In Unit 5, we look at the rule of law. So we look at the Canadian Constitution, we look at one of the founding treaty of the European Union, the most important, most recent one, the Lisbon Treaty. We also look at the role of the courts in Unit 6, and then we look more specifically at policies, but also very specific interactions. And so in Unit 7, for instance, we look at the role of First Nations, both in Canada and the EU. A lot of these relations are being rewritten today because First Nations have a greater say. And they rewrite the relationships with other governments, whether local, mid-range, like provinces or regions in Europe, and the central governments, whether federal or centralized, and then with the EU. And so this is very interesting because you see how these things are taking place both in Canada and in the European Union, and how equity and accessibility to the rule of law is in a way changing the nature of the relationship and the policy process as well. And then we look at formal processes, how you introduce a bill in the EU, for instance, and how it becomes basically law, and the same in Canada. We look at money relations, fiscal relations, and how it's organized in Unit 9. We look at two fields of policy in Unit 10 and 11. We look at social policy. In Canada and in the EU, we look at the social union. And we also look in Unit 11 at the environmental union. In other words, we look at how these interactions really influence, or what is the outcome of those interactions in these two policy fields. One is basically social policy, and the other one is environmental policy. And you'll see that in both cases we have very good examples as to how it works. Now, this course is organized so that you have to do quite a bit of work and readings, but each unit, as I just described them, are very lively. There are video clips, newspaper articles, you have sometimes policy documents, and we use 2 textbooks only, with a chapter from each textbook for most units. So you don't have a huge amount of readings. I have lots of video clips because I like to illustrate the discussions that we're having with interviews from elected officials, decision makers, stakeholders of various levels, but also what the problems are and how the problems are framed. The amount of work that you have to do in this course is, I would say, reasonable. It's 4 to 6 hours a week of work, including the reading and participation online. So you have weekly discussions, and you have to do some reading and post some comments. And you can also basically work in teams to prepare a policy paper where you analyze the various role of stakeholders, different levels of governments, different organizations, and come up with policy recommendations. The online participation of reading and posting questions and comments is about 40% overall of your final grade. And the work, which is organized often by team, although you don't have to do this as part of a team, is about 60% of the grade, and it's organized as such. You have 5% to find a policy proposal and policy area that you're interested in, and then you have to do a PowerPoint presentation of how you see the work developing, which allows for discussions, and then you have to write a paper. And altogether, that's 100% of the course grade. I think it's a very interesting course for people who are interested in institutions and how the machinery of government work, and how between Canada and the EU it varies. And I think it's a really an eye-opener because of the European dimension. So if you're well-versed in the Canadian experience, it's a really interesting course to you because you look at the European experience. If you know the European experience partially well, it really is a good course for you because you basically learn to compare and contrast how Canada and the EU are basically resolving and tackling issues in this more complex environment of federalism and multi-level governance. I welcome you in this course, and I hope that you'll agree with me on the assessment that it's a very interesting course. Thank you very much.